What is up? It's Tuesday at 2 o'clock Central. We are back for another hour of Mental Health Happy Hour Live. My name is JR with the bipolar DM, Jason. How you
Hello.
doing? And
Doing great.
our guest today is a good friend, somebody I've known for a few years, and she's also on the spectrum. She is a therapist working with people on the spectrum, an author, and just found out now she's doing a lot of training for Voc Rehab in South Carolina. And we're going to talk about something that Toni and I talked about before, which is bullying, something I think all of us with mental health issues and, well, something all of us that are alive have experience with. So let's bring her on. Toni Boucher, how you doing?
Hey, it's great to be here with you guys.
You too. You too.
Yeah, it's great to have you.
As always, Toni, Toni actually is a co-founder of the Autism Broadcast Network on YouTube, and that's where the Not Weird Just Autistic show is. And Toni was actually my first guest, and we talked about this very same subject of bullying.
We did.
So I think it's something really good, and something that last week when I saw a very sad story of a girl in Utah named Izzy Tichenor, who at 10 years old felt the need to commit suicide for being bullied. And I wanted that sink in for a minute. A 10-year-old girl felt her only option was to commit suicide after being bullied. I mean, Toni, you want to say anything about that right there?
I think that, that really does need to sink in. I mean, when you shared the story with me, that's exactly what I did. Was the thought went through my mind. A 10-year-old felt that was her only option, because that's what suicide is. Yeah. And then, the other thought that I had was we've really failed not just her, but the kids the other 10-year-olds who are engaging in that behavior on the other end of things. Yeah. Like, who feels the need to do that? Right. We have, as a society and as a community, we've not done what we needed to do, if that's what we've created.
Well, and the other thing that is, I sat and, when I first read the story, I did the same thing you did, Toni. I kind of sat and digested it. And the other thing that went through my mind was, what about the teachers and the staff at the school who sat there and watched it go on?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's exactly it. Is we create a culture of either, love and acceptance and curiosity and creativity, which is, I think, Jason, what you're doing with your work, or we create a culture of, of judgment and fear and, one-upping each other. I'm going to put you down to feel good about myself. And that's not an individual problem. We can't look at, the kids who bullied that girl or anybody and say, it's their fault. It's a culture that we've created where that's allowed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the story actually goes on and elaborates that there was a culture of bullying going on that was expressly being ignored by staff and teachers. And they knew it was going on, but they were actively not doing anything about it. And that was what made it even more tragic, is that it could have been prevented. Mm-hmm. It could have been snuffed out colds right from the beginning, had the teachers and the staff at the school jumped on this and stopped the bullying, especially after the parents began complaining.
Yeah. Toni, you and I talked about the first time, we had this discussion about how people on the spectrum are very susceptible to bullying and people with mental health issues are susceptible to bullying. But let's be honest, there's not one person alive today who has not been bullied at some point in their life.
That's right. I mean, it's part of our human condition is beautiful and caring and warm and we have that dark side as well. And yeah, every human has gone through, some sort of position, power discrepancy in which somebody has bullied them. And many of us have been on both sides of that coin. If I'm to really be honest about, my early childhood, yes, I was subjected to a lot of bullying growing up. But what did I do with that? I went home and practiced a little bit of that on my younger brother, So it's, we can't point fingers here. We got to look at our own, culpability in it. And
Yeah, because just like you said, Toni, on the flip side of that, all of us have been bullied, but at some point in our lives, all of us have bullied someone in some way.
yeah. Some people
making
to
a
greater
mean comment, it doesn't have to be bullying, the way we think of it today. But we've said mean things. We've done mean things to people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think, what's interesting about what you just said there, JR, is that, there are, I guess, degrees that we could look at. But one of the challenges I think that we have today as a culture is that the bullying isn't something that you go to school, somebody steals your lunch money and beats you up, and then you go home and you're safe. The bullying takes place when you've got this at home and you're lying in bed and somebody posts on social media an unfavorable picture of you or spreads a rumor. So it doesn't go away the way we had our little sanctuaries when you and I were growing up.
Yeah.
It's insidious and it's everywhere.
Right. Well, I just like you said, Toni, when we were all growing up, it was all, hey, kid, give me your lunch money, verbal, little physical pushing on the playground kind of thing. I mean, I hate to say it, but by today's standards, almost nothing major.
Yeah.
You know? But I mean, it's gone from that to, just like you said, the gaslighting and, employer. I mean, Jason, you were a combat medic in the Army. Mm-hmm. I would assume you've dealt with quite a bit of bullying in the military.
That's some in the military, but
but even your boss
really
jumping down your throat for no reason, and
I just chalk that up to culture with military, but
it's still bullying.
Yeah, and but it's also a different environment because we're war fighters, and we also have to mentally toughen up and prepare to take somebody's life. And unfortunately, the military's methods in the past had been, akin to bullying, physical abuse, stuff like that. They don't do that anymore, like when my dad was in. But it's there's a lot of tearing down, but there's also a lot of building up too. And but as a kid, though, facing bullying, it really did affect my life greatly. And fortunately, as far as I know, none of my kids are encountering bullying or anything like that. The school district that we're in here in Branson, Missouri, is very good at zero tolerance to bullying. So they take an active role. They take all allegations seriously, and they actively try to snuff it out and prevent these things from happening. Now, of course, kids are kids. It's still going to happen. There's still things that the school can't touch, like social media and stuff like that. But they have a better environment than a lot of other places here that I found.
Jason, I think that whole idea of, the administration and the adults really need to be active and proactive about how they handle bullying. And you can see very clearly places where they are taking that active role and not allowing it to occur. And, I had a really beautiful situation happen where during my Ask and Aspie panel, one time we were talking with some youngsters, and one of the kids asked one of the mentors in the program, "Well, did you ever get, bullied?" And the young man said, "Yes, I did. I was picked on, and I told my teacher, and the teacher addressed it. And so I learned at that moment, when something like that happens, I seek help and it gets taken care of." And I thought, that's very powerful.
Yeah.
That gives a person a sense of, of having something that they can do, because when you're bullied, you feel very powerless. There's,
right.
And so we need That's the dynamic of bullying, is somebody who's taking power over another person who does not have the ability to maintain their power. It's a power discrepancy. So we need an outside person who has the power, whether they're in a position of, authority, whether that's like because you're the principal of the school or the teacher, or because you have a perceived authority, another student who's, has a perceived sense of, of authority. So that's really important, is we need outside support to counter that power difference that happens in the bullying dynamic.
Yeah. Toni, the kids in our area, where Jason and I are from, are in a very interesting, unique situation in that Jason's kids are in a fairly large school district that reaches even 20 miles to the north. Kids still get bused into that school. But there's a lot of rural school districts with 1,000 kids, 1,200 kids total from K through 12. Yep. So they don't have the resources and everything that some of the bigger school districts have.
Yeah, and I think it is also a matter of culture too, where Branson is trying to cultivate a culture of anti-bullying and letting everybody know that it's not okay, versus other places, even larger schools that have more money, where they don't. And they allow it to go on for whatever reason, whether they think it's part of growing up or they think they just can't handle it.
Yeah, sometimes I think people don't know what to do. Yeah. I think a lot of times it's a sense of helplessness, because it's like, well, I don't know what to do. But to your point about creating, a message of anti-bullying, I think we need to take that one step further. We need to not only look at, okay, what don't we want, but what is it that we do stand for? Because that's really, if we take something away, we've got to put something new and better in that place. So, what is that message? What is it that we stand for? Is it, cooperation? Is it, working together? Is it supporting each other, creating a sense of community and family? Like, we've got to paint that picture, because you can't just go in and tell kids don't bully. Well, then what do I do? If this is the culture I'm in and this is the message I've learned, I've seen it, all around me, and you're telling me I don't do that anymore. Well, you've got to create a picture for what I do instead, and what my world's going to look like instead. That's really, really important piece of making that cultural change.
Yeah. Well, Toni, even take it a step farther. You do that and you talk to a kid and the kid goes, oh, I wasn't bullying, I was just teasing. Well,
that's still, yeah.
One man's trash is another man's treasure.
Yeah, and Branson does do that where they make it very clear bullying is not okay, but at the same time they do promote the positive traits. They have like 12 characteristics of the student. One each month they emphasize a different one of the 12, like courage and compassion and stuff like that. And so, yes, just like how you said, Toni, you got to replace it with something else. It just doesn't, nature abhors a vacuum. And so if you just do a message of we don't like bullying and don't replace it with something else, it's just going to fall on deaf ears, because, what is it to replace it with, and fortunately Branson's been very good about trying to replace that with positive attributes that they want the students to emulate.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important piece of it, is really getting students or young people to reflect on, who do I want to be as a person? Like, who am I and who do I choose to be? And giving students permission to, draw on those more courageous qualities, and giving students permission to stand up for each other and to make a statement about, solidarity, about, if I hurt you, that ultimately hurts me. I think that's, when you look at wartime, you look at any kind of aggression against people, whether it's in, a bullying environment or war, or when we're trying to, eradicate a population, we have to dehumanize them. We have to look at somebody as less than us and less than human. That gives us permission in our minds to do the harmful thing.
Yeah.
If I see you as a part of me, then every action I take towards you comes back and reflects on me. And to that effect, I have 3 children that I've given birth to. But whenever I come across kids of any age, I think of them as my surrogate children. So it's not that I just have to look out for my own kids because I gave birth to them, but all of the children in my son's 5th grade class, I feel I need to have a responsibility to care for them and to nurture them in some way. And I think that when we start seeing that interconnection, that we're all interconnected and we're all dependent on each other, then it's really hard, to get into that mindset of hurting people.
Yeah. Well, and Toni, one thing to point out is it's not just kids that get bullied. I mean,
Yes.
I will be 56 later this month, and just 3 years ago, I had another adult, who bullied me for being autistic.
Yes.
Now, in 53 years, had learned to deal with it, but it still was bullying.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you would think by this day and age, people have grown up.
Yeah. And I think that's really important to remember, is that it's not about, it doesn't just happen for kids. There's a lot of bullying that happens in the workforce. And again, I think it's important to look, okay, what do we mean when we're talking about bullying? Yes, it could be somebody takes your lunch money and beats you up. But it could also, anytime you've got a power discrepancy and somebody's using that against you in a harmful way, whether that's emotionally or physically, if I come up to you and pressure you into doing my work in addition to your own work, and I don't do it, and you feel like you don't have a choice because you might get fired or I might tell somebody something about you, then that's a power differential, and that's a bullying situation. And that absolutely can happen at work. It can happen in social settings. For adults.
Yeah, well, just like with work, I think one of the most common ones is a supervisor telling somebody, I need you to do this, or you need to do this. Well, I'm supposed to be off in 20 minutes. You're going to stay for another 4 hours.
Yeah.
Well, you legally, you've got a choice, but do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when your review's coming up and stuff like that. And it's really hard to prove those cases of bullying in the workplace, more so than it is in school, because people don't seem to take it as seriously in the workplace as they do with kids.
Yeah, well, and you're being paid to work, and so there's, I think, in some people's minds, okay, you should just accept it and chalk it up and do whatever, you pull up your big boy pants and do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Toni, let's talk about then the mental health aspect of the bullying on the person who's being bullied. It goes from that moment of, just kind of feeling a little bad about yourself, to depression, to anxiety for being in that situation again or around those people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was talking the other day with somebody who's working with somebody in a job, and they have such self-defeating attitudes about themselves because that's the message they heard from, kids as they were growing up. They were picked on a lot. And so you begin to internalize those messages. And then what happens is it shows up in all of these mental health issues like depression, trauma. It creates a lot of trauma. I work with a lot of clients who are bullied who deal with a lot of trauma. I deal with my own traumas over my own bullying, and I'm 51 years old, and I'm still dealing with, the traumas of that. But what it also does, and I think this is, what's so difficult about it, is when you are used to people treating you that certain way, you internalize those thoughts, and you actually end up treating yourself the same way. Because you don't have good boundaries, so you end up bullying yourself. You have the same kind of self-talk. You don't protect your physical body from, being in pain. You may overdo yourself, in ways that are not healthy. And that can be really passive stuff, like not getting enough sleep or drinking a little bit too much at night. So it's like kind of a passive suicide that you go through. Or it can be more extreme in terms of like doing self-harm. And so that I think is really important for people to think about, is when you experience bullying, it's very easy to internalize those things and then treat yourself that way as well.
Yeah, and it goes on for years, and most of the time I'm fine, but I have little periods like I'm in the middle of right now where I get a little down on myself, I feel bad about myself, and when I really sit down and focus on it and think about it, part of it does come back to the way I felt growing up.
Oh,
and,
absolutely.
The stuff I was subjected to.
Yeah, and it's subconscious. It's not, like, I think probably a lot of people who watch this show and those of us here today on the show we're very heady. We're very thoughtful about things. We think deeply. And, but when something like that has impacted you, it traumatizes you, and it doesn't sit in this frontal part of your brain, which is logical and can think things through. Where it embeds itself is in the back part of your subconscious survival part of the brain. And that is not something that you're even aware of in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Toni, knowing the two of you, I can say that not only do we all think about things, we all overthink things. And then when we're done overthinking them, we overthink them again and again and again.
Yeah.
I know Jason and I have had several conversations where we've decided, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then I live 15 minutes from him. I get home and I'm calling him going, what do you think?
I totally get it.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, with my mental illness, I overthink things a lot. I internalize a lot. I'll take the littlest things, comments, slights, and stuff like that, explode them, and make them bigger than they really are, oftentimes. But being self-aware of that, though, too, helps me to counter it. To do coping techniques and mental exercises and stuff like that in order to counteract those negative thoughts, the self-talk and stuff like that, especially negative self-talk. Just recently had a run-in with somebody last night that really, really bothered me. And it wasn't until this, even though this morning I'm pretty much over it, I'm still having anxiety about it. And it's been almost 24 hours, and that person's probably haven't even given a second thought about it, but I'm still here coping with the fallout of it.
Yeah, I think that...
To be clear, it wasn't me.
No.
We didn't think so, JR. But I think that's really important. Like you said it so well, Jason, that, I work with people who had traumatizing experiences with bullies when they were, 5 or 6 or 10 or 15, and they're 40 or 50 now, and they're still paralyzed by those experiences that happened. So it's not like it's just some, kind of light thing. It for some of us, and, for, those of us on the spectrum, or people who have perseverative kinds of thinking or have, disabilities, we're so used to being the odd man out, having to, like you said, overthink or be on edge and be aware and mask our behaviors and how we act, that these things really traumatize us to the core and may impact us years and years down the line.
Yeah, and sometimes more so for us because of how we think and how our brains are wired. Than the average person. The average person will just say, blow it off, I'll go... screw them, F them, I'll just move on. Well, for like me, I can't move on. And I try and try and try, but it is like a mountain trying to get over sometimes with my own thoughts and feelings.
Go ahead, Toni.
No, that's what I see with the folks I work with too, because we've got so much perseverative thinking, and at one point I think that that serves us well. It can make us good at what we do if we decide to excel in something, but it can, in these sorts of cases, when we have situations where there's been a something traumatizing that happens, we really get stuck in it to a greater degree.
I just think, Toni, from the autism point of view, I think it just has to do with our overthinking and with our ability to never forget things, even though God, we want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I want to. No kidding. It's like hell. I mean, I have times when I remember, in my past where I just, banging my head was better than just having those thoughts go through my head.
Oh yeah,
Because
Yeah.
it can
Yeah,
really be
sometimes literally.
excruciating. Yeah, literally. That's what I mean. Yeah, it's that excruciating.
And there are times when I sit there and I think, now I understand why people do a lot of drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. I
I'm
mean,
going
that
to,
is
but
that is why we get addicted, because we want to kill the pain.
yeah,
And that is a consequence of, that some people choose to go that route to cope with the bullying. Again, though, that's why it's so important to get those other folks in to support people and give them another solution than, something that's, destructive,
yeah.
like turning into
Tony,
addiction
one thing
or
I think that's
suicide.
important is that people understand that a lot of times they'll not realize they're bullying. They'll think they're just teasing or they're playing around. But how do we get people to understand the way that it impacts us?
Yeah. So I think we should talk about empathy here for a minute, because I think this plays a really big role. Like, for those of us on the spectrum, I know that we feel things so much more deeply and so much more passionately as a rule. Now, sometimes we have delays, or sometimes we don't feel something as deeply, but we can be very, very empathetic. And so if you hurt, I feel it, like physically feel your pain. And so I think, it's about empathy. And, there's all these myths that used to go on about how autistic people can't experience empathy. And it's exactly the opposite, that we feel it so deeply that it's painful for us. But I think that really, in order for people to understand how things impact us, I think it comes down to a willingness to have empathy, which is, something we definitely have sometimes to our detriment. But you've got to be willing to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And I think that's a boundary issue. Like, if I say something and it's no big deal to me, but if it hurts you deeply, then I'm not going to want to say that again, because I don't want to hurt you. So it's about having that empathy and really teaching, empathy to understand that, somebody else may feel something differently, and that you can recognize that in their reality, that's more painful than it is in yours.
Yeah. One thing I remember my mom saying repeatedly when I was younger is, well, we're not laughing at you, we're laughing with you. And my first response was always, but I'm not laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you are laughing. I mean, it's the whole autistic Aspie logic.
It is completely.
Logically, factually. You're not laughing at me, you're laughing with me. I'm not laughing, therefore you're laughing at me.
Yes. Logic 101. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. But again, it goes back to that culture. Like, we're in a culture that doesn't recognize bullying a lot of times because it's so embedded in the culture. So I think we should actually talk about some specific. Do we have time to talk about some?
We have another half hour. Let's go.
Okay, yeah, I think we need to talk about some specific ways that people can bully, so that, like, our listeners today can actually be on the watch out for this.
Yeah. Well, Toni, I think the one that is the most recent one, recent type of bullying, that we already kind of touched on, is the gaslighting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cyberbullying.
Well, it doesn't have. I mean, it mainly is cyber, but gaslighting can still be in person.
Yeah. Hey, Jared, give us an example of how gaslighting plays out.
Just creating a lie about somebody, or making, like you said, just making fun of somebody's dress or their shirt, or wearing a hijab because their cultural and religious beliefs. Which, again, to the person doing the gaslighting, is probably nothing that's a big deal, but it is.
If I step on
Yeah.
your toe and it hurts and you say, ouch, and I say, oh, that didn't hurt. That's,
That technically is the definition of gaslighting.
yeah.
It
It's
is
denying
trying to
that
convince
you've
you.
done anything wrong at
Yeah.
all, that
Yeah.
or it even happened.
Erasing it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
So-
like, you remember when you said such and such about me, and they're like, no, I never said that.
Yeah.
Now you're making it up. Yeah.
I think, one way that we see bullying play out in a really insidious sort of way is if you're in a group and you exclude somebody, like everybody turns and doesn't allow a certain person to be part of that conversation, or you invite 3 girls to go to the movies and there's another girl, you exclude one of your friends from that. That's bullying. That's taking a power differential, and it's hurtful.
Yeah. Well, let's go to an example that was in the news recently and everything. I think when you get right down to it, a lot of that was bullying. He was making crappy comments about other people based on racial traits or sexuality, things like that. Well, yeah, he meant it as a joke, but it wasn't funny.
No.
Not at all.
Yeah, and a lot of it's stuff that he wouldn't have the balls to say to somebody's face.
Yeah, the email and the texting really changes the dynamic here, because you're right. Or even like online social media, there's a lot of people who are really comfortable and ballsy making comments like in a social media line, but they would never say something to a person's face. And I think I really, here's the other thing. Like, on one hand, we don't want to hurt people's feelings, but I think we have really got to stop avoiding tough conversations and really facing them like head on. Like if you disagree with me on something, if we're on 2 different sides of an issue, it doesn't help us to avoid it, and it doesn't help us to fight, to call each other names, or to invalidate each other's perspectives. But we really have to start having some very mature, grown-up adult conversations about our societal issues that we have that we are not seeing eye to eye on, so that we can come to some win-win situations. And I think, it's really important to recognize that, on one hand, you don't want to hurt people's feelings and we don't want to bully, but we also have to have mature adult conversations. So giving people the skills and ability to assertively communicate is really important, because what I see a lot of times when I'm working with young people is they don't know how to say, I disagree with what you're saying. Respectfully, here's my thoughts on it. Instead, they may do some, insults, throw insults at a person, or be sarcastic, and in ways that really creates that bullying kind of dynamic, because a person doesn't know how to assertively communicate. So I think, if you look at how we deal with things on the media, the politicians, it's this like mudslinging thing that goes on, and we need to really have tough conversations in a polite, respectful way, but the tough conversations need to be taking place.
Yep. Well, and again, going back to stuff that's, fairly current in the news today, the whole Britney Spears conservatorship stuff, where she's got somebody telling her, oh, no, you don't need that. You don't need this. You need this. Well, does she?
Yeah. Or you need to work 6 days a week, and with no breaks and no time off. I mean, like her father was doing to her. It's just a lot of abuse going on in that situation, allegedly.
And trust me, I want to say in those kind of situations, I don't think anybody's right, anybody's wrong. I think, there's give and take on both sides, but, still, when you're in charge of somebody else's life and you're going to tell them, no, this isn't what you need. That's not what you need. This is what you need. And the person's competent.
Yeah. I think that's a huge issue with, folks We work with like anybody who's got a mental health issue or anybody who's got a developmental disability. We're at great risk of having somebody else come into our lives and decide for us, you don't have the right to live here. You don't have the right to do this kind of work. Or, you need to be you need to be in a hospital to take this kind of medication.
Yeah, somebody needs to take over your finances and everything like that, and take it out of your hands. And I've had that happen to me.
Yeah,
people threaten to do that, and it's scary. What the law can do in stripping a person's right away. Without very much of a fight.
Taking that back to this theme of bullying, when we start out as little people and people are stealing the lunch money, ignoring us, excluding us, tripping us, pulling our pants down, doing whatever it is that, they're doing to be cruel. When we get older and somebody comes and says, I don't think you should have control over your finances. If somebody's been stealing our lunch money all our lives, it's a lot easier to not recognize that that's your right to have, autonomy over your own life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something that I think we all still deal with in some form. Even if we don't have those rights taken away from us, we still have people going, well, are you sure you should be making that decision, or are you qualified? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is a whole other subject, and we'll get off of it. But Toni, the guest I had on the Not We're Just Autistic show 2 weeks after you was Jonathan Martinez, who is a disability rights lawyer who won a landmark case in Virginia regarding supported decision making over guardianship. And supported decision making, when you get right down to it, is just the ability to ask others their opinion and gather information before making your own decision.
Yeah, and that's impaired when we have a culture of bullying.
Yes,
big time.
Absolutely. Well, okay, let's go away from the cyberbullying and all that. Toni, what's another way that people tend to get bullied?
So when we think about the power differentials, it can be things like, oh, let me borrow your pencil, or you go ahead and help me. I need you to help me do my assignment for me. And
right.
Help is one thing, but when you've got somebody who's actually coercing you into doing their work for them, or cheating on a test, that happens a lot. Or even just peer pressuring somebody into trying something, whatever it is that they're not comfortable with, going a place they're not comfortable going, breaking the law, a lot of the folks that I've worked with have had peer pressure and bullying to force them to do drugs. And I actually worked with teens who the first experience they had with smoking marijuana was brothers and cousins forced them to do it. So that happens.
Peer pressure is the ultimate bullying.
Yeah.
It's looked at as something that's not good, but it's not really looked on as truly bad.
Yeah. Our words can really, be powerful. And if you have that nickname, yours is a great example of that. I think people used to call you Rain Man.
My boss used to call me Forrest Gump.
Oh, Forrest Gump, yeah.
But,
so there may not have been anything intentional about that, but when you can use a word like that and then everybody goes around and thinks, oh yeah, here comes Forrest Gump, and everybody kind of plays into that, oh yeah, it's that person, and they have that nickname. Nicknames can be really bullying.
But in elementary school and middle school, for me, with my last name being Reed and having a speech impediment where I pronounce my R's like W's, it was weed.
Oh.
Luckily, that kind of went away as I approached high school. But You know, it was tough in elementary and middle school because I just knew I was going to get called weed, and there was nothing I could do about it because that's how I spoke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You can place your body, you know, you can say things that are bullying, you can physically touch somebody, but you can just place your body in a way that's intimidating. You know, you see the stereotypes of the big college or the big high school jocks who run down the hallway and like kind of just by their presence and the sheer force of like 6, you know, football players kind of pushing the, you know, the little skinny guys aside. You know, that's an intimidation play.
I played adult recreational ice hockey for 25 years, and being that I am 6 foot and, you know, almost 250 pounds, and that I don't like people being bullied and picked on. You know, when I saw one of my players, you know, getting picked on by somebody else, I would just skate in between them and just stand there and look at them and just eventually just say hi.
That's really, though, what we want to see in terms of like giving people permission to not allow that. Like you actually used your positioning to send a message that was not okay.
Oh yeah, no. In 25 years, I never threw a punch.
Yeah.
Never hit anybody. Never got overly physical. But I would stand in there and step in between them and say, "You want to go? Go with me."
Yeah, but that's the thing is you've as a peer made that decision to not allow the bullying to happen.
Right.
Like you could have just sat aside and let them go at it, but you took. And I think there's a real power when peers step up to the plate and say, look, we're not doing this. This is my friend, leave him alone. Or just have the presence like you did to step in between people. That's really important. We've got to be giving, you know, kids permission to stand up for each other and say, this is not okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember one day, it was after a game, and I was walking back to the locker room, and I was coming around a corner, and normally they'll put the two teams at opposite ends of the rink, you know, in locker rooms, but they happened to put us right next to each other, which was a big mistake. And I heard somebody yelling, and I could tell the voice wasn't one of my teammates. I heard somebody yell, "Who wants to fight?" And I, around the corner, yelled, "I'll go." And then I thought about that as I was walking on my skates going, I don't even know who this is. What if he's the guy that's twice my size?
So, guys, you know, here's another thought. So, you know, we talked a little bit about how it's important to paint a picture of what we do instead. And I think we really have to look at that in terms of people who actively engage in bullying behavior. So one of the strategies that I use a lot when I'm working with young people is to identify those people who have a tendency to be engaging in bullying behaviors and give them a different sort of power by bringing them in and saying, look, I need you to help make sure everybody participates today. You know, watch and make sure that, if you see that somebody wants to talk and they haven't had a chance, they might be shy. Mm-hmm. You're a more outgoing person. Point it out, make sure they get the chance to talk. Or you're here to make sure everybody is, gets safely through the doors. And in my experience, people who engage in bullying behaviors, a lot of times that is an incompatible behavior, which they would rather do anyway. They don't know what else to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm thinking back to 5th grade, and the new boy at school came and borrowed a pencil of mine. And when he returned it to me, he took it and he marked it up my sweater. And I was like, what a mean kid. I just lent him my pencil. Well, years later, I realized he had a crush on me. But, he didn't know how to show that in a socially acceptable way. And, so it kind of hurt my feelings and ruined my sweater. And he didn't get his needs met because he didn't, because I just thought he was a jerk then. I didn't care how cute he was because he wasn't being nice to me. So He didn't get his needs met. I didn't get my needs met. So when we give, we give those people who are engaging in, dangerous or unhealthy behaviors alternatives, they're often really willing to take them on. And that means, having a different role, having a leadership role, a positive leadership role. And it also means giving them effective communication tools ways to speak up and get their needs met in an assertive way versus, pulling people down.
Yeah. I will say this. One of the things I'm most proud of as an adult is that when I coached ice hockey, youth ice hockey for all those years, I really taught my kids the value of respecting their teammates, respecting their opponents, respecting other people. And I mean, I've got 11-year-olds through high school varsity, and middle of a season, end of a season, these kids are all standing up for each other, and
that's a huge success.
Something you don't see a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and being in Southern California, the LA area, I mean, there's so much cultural diversity. I mean, there were kids on my team that were European, like born in Europe, Latin American, black, white, Asian, everything. And they're all together, and they're all friends. They're all going out to breakfast together. They're all standing up for each other in the locker room and on the ice. And you don't see that enough.
So it sounds like you really created a sense of like belonging, and they really had a bonding that took place.
Yeah, well, it was my experience. I mean, my first sports experiences, 7 years old, playing Little League baseball, and to say I was bad was such an understatement. I never got a hit in 3 years. And my coach, my first year, told me, I only play you 3 innings because I have to. 10 years old, the first year I played soccer. Now, I went on to play soccer in college, but my first experience at 10 years old playing soccer, my coach told me, I only play you half a game because I have to. And as I started coaching high school soccer, youth and high school soccer, and then ice hockey, my thoughts were, I don't want any other kid to go through and deal with that like I did.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that's been mentioned is the empowering other people to be an advocate and stand up against bullying.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times those that are being bullied don't have a voice for themselves. I mean, it's one thing to tell them, oh, you just need to stand up for yourself. You need to speak up. Sometimes we can't. And it's important
that's the nature of bullying,
people
right?
out there. Yeah. It's so important to have people out there who are willing to stand up against bullying and say, no, this is not right. I'm not going to allow this to happen in front of me.
Right. Well, and I think the big thing for us as adults, especially, is to start conversations. Because I would see some of my players getting picked on or whatever, and I would go up and talk to them. Well, tell me exactly how that makes you feel. What is it you want to do to the person? So you kind of get an idea where they're coming from. And then you can offer solutions to them based on how they're feeling exactly and what it is they want to do to rectify the situation.
I really like that because you're validating their feelings. You're validating their experience.
Yeah, because I mean, we all know it's different for all of us. I mean, the bullying could make them very angry, or it could make them very sad and depressed, or it could make them feel lonely and isolated. Well, until you know how that's making them feel, you can't help them get over it. Okay. Jason, we got about 12, 13 more minutes. I want to talk to Toni about some of the stuff she's got going on, but anything else you want to share about bullying before we switch topics?
For a lot of people, you think it's just in childhood, but like what we discussed before, for many people, especially those of us with a disability, it affects us even into adulthood. And so something that needs to be realized by adults is that when they allow kids to bully each other, the effects don't end in elementary school. They don't end in junior high or high school. They continue on in somebody's life for years and years and years, causing problems. And so it's a vicious cycle that needs to be put a stop to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Toni, I want to talk about you and what you got going a little bit. You do a lot of work with people that are on the spectrum that are entrepreneurs and crafters and do things like that. You've got a fall trunk show coming up.
Yes, I'm very excited. So I started a women's social group several years ago. I'd been running a men's social group that was vastly successful. And some families said, Toni, let's do this for the women too. And I was like, well, women really don't like to be together. Autistic women, think other women are mean. So we don't care to be together. So how am I going to do this? And I was like, well, I have a bunch of jewelry supplies. If I give them something to do with their hands, at least we'll know, everybody will know what to do. That's always an autistic conundrum. Go in a group of people and what the heck do you do? How do you stand? Where do you sit? What do you do? Mm-hmm. So I brought my jewelry supplies in, and we started this women's social group making jewelry. And we have an online store. And so we're on our third annual trunk show that's coming up, where the women come to the social group. It's much like what you do, Jason, with your gaming, where it's a safe place where you work on your skills, your social skills, you work on your employment skills, and you make jewelry. And so we'll be December 11th, we'll be having an in-person trunk show, but people can go to the online store and purchase these beautiful pieces of jewelry that are made by the women on the spectrum in the social group. We are actually going to be having knitting. We have one of the gals knit scarves, and so we're adding that collection this year. And the money goes to the women who make the items. So if a woman sells a bracelet or a necklace, then that money goes to her, and it's a little income for her. So that's really exciting to have that, see how that's growing and coming together.
And they can go to ToniBoucher.net right now and find that.
You can go to ToniBoucher.net right now and go to shop, and that'll take you to the women's store. And it's a great time for that, because we have pieces ranging from like $12 on up to like $100, lots of variety, and we're always putting new pieces in. I think I have 150 pieces at the office that I still need to add into the store. So come back if frequently for new things. But yeah, you can go there, ToniBoucher.net shop, and you can get something out. The women will ship it out to you wherever you are. We only ship in the United States right now, but anywhere in the States you can. We sold $100 worth of stuff to somebody in California awesome. Yesterday. We're here in South Carolina, so it's great for the women to have that experience. It's scary. There's one woman who, the first time she made a bracelet, she was terrified. She was like, Toni, come help me. And she was so anxious about the whole process. And I think just her alone now, she has made hundreds of bracelets, and they're gorgeous, and necklaces that are beautiful. And she makes a good part-time little income doing it. So,
with the holidays coming up and shipping issues. Yeah. Yeah, and with holidays and shipping issues, this is a great opportunity.
Exactly. Now's a great time.
To help out somebody who needs these skills, but also to help yourself out too with shopping and taking care of Christmas.
Exactly.
Well, and for people that are women that are on the spectrum in other parts of the country, these are just ideas.
Yep.
That you can do, on your own.
Yep.
So I think that's something we need to talk about another time. Is the limited number of women diagnosed, and I'll say this, is diagnosed as being on the spectrum, because I think there's just as many women out there as there are men.
I think there are too. There are just as many women. It's just they're not identified. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And
no, JR, I love what you said though about if you're a woman, if you're somebody on the spectrum, I don't care, man, woman, whatever, and you have a passion or an interest, something that you make or do, you can do this. I mean, we put together the jewelry store, and it's working really great for us. We actually have people from other parts of the state who have their items in our store. So it's a virtual world. We don't have to be limited to that. So if somebody wanted to see if their pieces could be curated to our store, we'd be happy to do that, or do your own. And I think that's a really wonderful idea. Thanks for sharing, JR, that it's something that they're ideas that other people can do and try.
Well, and let's be honest. I mean, online and through social media, people on the spectrum tend to really help each other. Mm-hmm. So if you can just put the word out there that that's what you're doing, I guarantee you're going to have lots and lots of people on the spectrum
Yeah.
that are going to support you and help you get the word out.
Yeah, it's so true. So
And
true.
also, it's not just for people on the spectrum. It's for anybody who is dealing with any kind of a neurodiversity issue or a mental health issue, or just feels bad about themselves, and struggles to find their place. Because I get that's something that all three of us still to this day struggle with is, and not all the time, but we have our moments where we all
It's a
feel
journey.
like we're struggling to find our place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I am.
Yeah, definitely. Me too. I would think that by now I'd have everything figured out, but
I know.
no, that's not. I feel like every time I get to the spot that I think, all right, I've got it all figured out, I got to start all over again from square one.
Yeah.
And now I'm building back up again, and I'm worried about, all right, how long is this going to last before I'm going to start all over again from square one, because of my mental illness. And then it gets very frustrating. It's discouraging, depressing at the same time. But, what other choice do I got but to keep moving on?
I think we have to stick together, though. I mean, that's part of the power of community. I mean, JR, we did the dating panel, not too long ago, and I remember it was exhausting, as those things always are. But I left feeling so like these are my people. They understand me, and I understand them, and we love each other, and we're going to go to bat for each other. And I think it's really important to for us to stick together.
Yeah. So, Toni, why don't you tell us a little bit about Autism Translated?
Oh, yeah. So Autism Translated is a book that I wrote. I wrote the book because my clients asked me to do it. And it's a compilation of really their thoughts. And the book is really targeted towards family members or professionals who'd really like to understand better what the autistic experience is. And so it's a lot of their stories and what the messages that they want to share with families. And I've just put it into a fashion that is very digestible and understandable for people who are neurotypical. So anybody who's not on the spectrum who would like to understand more can pick up Autism Translated on Amazon, or you can buy it at my website as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Toni, the other thing I think, though, it's not just for neurotypicals, because like Dr. Stephen Shore said, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, meaning there are thousands of possible traits that people on the spectrum have. Now, there's a lot of them that overlap and that a lot of them have.
And they really show up differently for people. Yeah, and I've had a lot of good feedback from folks on the spectrum who've read the book. Sometimes it helps to just clarify like what you're experiencing, and to see that you're not alone. Because there's a lot of case studies, a lot of stories in there that if you're on the spectrum, you read it and you're like, oh yeah, I can relate to this. As a matter of fact, fun story, part of my realizing I was on the spectrum was because as I was writing the book and I was writing my clients' stories, I was like, oh, I was having flashbacks to like the same exact things happening. I was like, oh, maybe my daughter's got a diagnosis. Maybe there's something to this with me here, and that started my journey of looking into my own autism.
Yeah, Toni, I apologize because I forget, but how long ago was it that you were diagnosed?
Oh gosh, I don't even remember now. Maybe
roughly
6 years ago. I'm terrible with numbers.
I would think it was after me.
I'm a very late diagnosis, sometime in my 40s.
Yeah, and I was 46 when I got diagnosed.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm an autism professional. I've been working with autistic people for over 30 years now. But I'm a woman, and it shows up differently for us. So yeah, we have to have that conversation at some point about women on the spectrum.
Yeah. So Jason, how old were you when you found out you were bipolar?
22. So it hit me but that's about the time of the age when bipolar emerges, is in the late teens, early 20s. So I was right in that sweet spot when it happened, and then it just devastated my career.
Yeah, my ex-wife was either 27 or 28 when she was diagnosed.
Yeah.
It was bipolar.
Did you always know, like when you were younger, something was unique or different about you?
Well, I knew things were different, but I didn't know how different they were from everybody else. I never felt quite human. I mean, I still don't feel quite human.
Yeah. I think we relate to that, right, JR? I mean,
Yeah. But
I always
Tony,
thought something was wrong with all those other kids. Like, what is wrong with these people?
Yeah.
But Tony, when asking that question to Jason, you need to realize that he was a Navy brat, so he grew up all over the world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be
went to
natural for
14
him to
different
feel out of
schools.
place.
Yeah, because you had no real home.
And different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're with not just kids from your neighborhood or your area or your city or your state, you're with kids from all over the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I graduated from high school in Japan and lived in Spain for a while. But, you know, and of course all over the United States too, both in civilian schools and DOD schools, you know, and I went to 14 different schools growing up, and I was always, except for one time, I was always the new kid.
So hard. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it sucked. It sucked a lot, and it affected me a lot in my life.
Yep.
No kidding.
Yep. All right. Well, tell you what, it is 3:00. It has been just an awesome hour, probably as fast as any hour we've done so far.
Mm-hmm.
And Toni, thank you so much for joining us. ToniBoucher.net is where you can find her. Mm-hmm. And Toni, I appreciate this, and we'll have to get you back on to talk about the whole women and autism thing too.
Yeah, that's a really important thing. Yeah,
Jason,
I'm on it.
I don't know if you know this, but and Toni, correct me if I'm wrong, it's right around 25% or so, 25% of people with autism that are diagnosed are women?
So yeah, we think that the statistics are that, like for every one woman who has a diagnosis, it's like 4 guys. Yeah. But I think you're 100% correct that we have as many women on the spectrum. It's just we don't have a way to track them. We can talk about that at a later date, but we don't have the assessments.
No. I was just kind of trying to tease the whole idea is that there aren't just as many of you as there are of me, but you know the women mask it so well. And
Yep. And we don't have good assessments, and we don't have people trained to do the job to identify them. So. It would be a very important show to have. Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, ToniBoucher.net and check out Autism Translated and buy some stuff at the Trunk Show. I don't need any women's jewelry, but buy it for your family. So, Toni, thank you very much, and Jason, you and I will be back next week at 2 p.m. on Tuesday. So, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.